Social Security?
Yes, but not overnight. Matter of fact, my program is the only one that is going to be able to take care of the elderly. I'd like to get the young people out of it, just the next generation, because there's no money there, and they're going to have to pay 50 years and they're not going to get anything. There's no money there. Now I'm saying I'd take care of all the elderly, all those who are dependent, but I would save the money from this wild spending overseas. We can save hundreds of billions of dollars and still take care of the elderly. Right now, they're getting behind because they're having a 10 to 12% inflation rate and we give them a 2% increase. So they're really hurting. I don't want taxes on the Social Security benefits that they receive. I have a bill in that would secure the trust fund where none of that money could be spent in the general revenues. So in many ways, though, the goal would be to get us out of this program that is a failure. It doesn't work and is going to bankrupt this country, that the only way you can do that is save enough money, tide the people over, let the young people get out, because they're going to be paying all these years and they're not going to get anything. So ironically, I who defend the position that, the federal government probably should have never been involved, I probably have the only program that would really help the elderly, because the way we're going now, the money's not going to be there. There's no way these cost of living increases are ever going to keep up with their benefits are never going to keep up with their cost of living. They're decreasing. I say my program has a better chance of helping them than any other one.
Governor Huckabee, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, said very straightforward, if entitlement spending continues as the baby boomers retire from 40 million to 80 million on Social Security and Medicare, we'll have to raise taxes by a third or cut all other programs other than Medicare and Social Security by half. That is his testimony. What will you do specifically to save Social Security?
I'm going to address that, but I want to first comment on Mitt's decision on the putting in an extraordinary amount of money in the campaign. First of all, let me say, you've got 5 exceptional sons I know you're very proud of, and you said you wanted them to inherit a great country, and I have a solution, Mitt, that I think will work. If the country will elect me president, they'll inherit a great country, and your boys will still get your money too, and I think that'd be a great answer. So I want to offer that as a solution tonight for inheritance. On the Social Security question, one of the reasons that we're in trouble is because we have a smaller group of people paying into the Social Security system. Fewer wage earners, more Americans getting their wealth from dividends and from investments. So you have a shrinking supply. You have 10,000 baby boomers a day getting into the system. One of the reasons I'm a strong supporter of the fair tax is that you suddenly have a different funding stream for Social Security. It comes out of the general fund. So you now have a more reliable, a more stable, and a much broader funding system that will supply Social Security.
But if you don't have a fair tax, which is highly unlikely...
Well, everybody keeps talking about how unlikely it is. But it was unlikely that we'd go to the moon. It was unlikely that we would have the Manhattan Project.
Specifically, what will you do...
Being president... No, Tim, I just want to say, everybody talks about how unlikely these things are. That's what's wrong in America. We're always talking about what we can't do. We need to be talking about what we can do, whether it's energy independence, whether it's passing a tax system that'll work. And I do believe when you have an economy that brings that $12 trillion that's parked offshore, bring it back to this country, then you have a true economic stimulus. More people going back to work in America, people making wages, and that's where we start seeing the capacity to pay for Social Security.
Governor Romney, you are a big fan of Ronald Reagan. Will you do for Social Security what Ronald Reagan did in 1983?
Raise taxes. I'm not going to raise taxes. What I'm going to do...
Well, Ronald Reagan raised the payroll tax, and he also raised the retirement age, and he saved Social Security with Alan Greenspan and Tip O'Neill and Bob Dole and Pat Moynihan. Yeah, would you do what Ronald Reagan did?
No, I don't want to raise taxes. I've pointed out that of the 4 ways to solve the shortfall in Social Security, the worst idea is to raise taxes on the American people, because it has a double whammy. Not only are you taking money away from their pocketbooks, you're also slowing down the economy. You slow down the economy, more people lose work. More people lose work, of course, you're having a lot of folks that really have their lives turned upside down. So raising taxes is just something you don't want to do. There are 3 other ways that you can solve the problem of Social Security. And they're ways that have been brought forward by a number of Republicans over the years. We're going to have to sit down with the Democrats and say, let's have a compromise on these 3 elements that can get us to bring Social Security into economic balance. What are they? Well, number one, you can have personal accounts where people can invest in something that does better than government bonds with some portion of their Social Security. Number two, you can say we're going to have the initial benefit calculation for wealthier Americans calculated based on the consumer price index rather than the wage index. That saves almost 2/3 of the shortfall. And then number three, you can change the retirement age. You can push it out a little bit. And so those are the three arithmetic things you can do. There's going to have to be an agreement reached, Republicans and Democrats. Senator Judd Gregg has introduced legislation co-sponsored by Democrats saying put an equal number of Republicans and Democrats in a committee, have them work together, come up with a compromise, bring it forward, require a 60% vote to get the job done. And those are the three that I think are the ones that have to be pursued for us to solve the issue of Social Security. But don't forget, let's not scare anybody listening in who's on Social Security or near Social Security. It's not going to change the current program. It's not going to change for anybody who's already in retirement or near retirement. But we have to be honest to the people coming along. The program's going to have to change for 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds.
Governor, thanks. Time is up. And to the very patient Paul Tash we go in the front row from the St. Petersburg Times. Paul?
Mayor Giuliani, this question to you comes from Marshall Brannon of St. Petersburg. Your immigration plan calls for all immigrants to learn English to gain citizenship. So why is your campaign airing an ad in Spanish?
The reality is I believe that America is a country that is built around the English language. If you want to become a citizen, you should demonstrate your facility with English. If you know other languages, that is wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. And if we have substantial portions of populations that know other languages, I'm very comfortable trying to reach them in both English and in Spanish. The core of my plan on immigration is to stop illegal immigration at the border with a border stat system, with technology, with an increased border patrol. I believe we can stop illegal immigration if we stop it right at the border. And then we should develop a tamper-proof ID card so that people that want to come into the United States should be allowed to do that. We have to teach new behavior. The new behavior is, if you want to come into the United States, you have to identify yourself, which after all makes the United States like every other country, right? You can't get into most countries without identifying yourself. And then if you got the tamper-proof ID card, you'd be allowed to work, pay taxes, get online, become a citizen, follow the rules, but then at the end of the line, you'd have to be able to read, write, and speak English. If you speak a second language or a third language or a fourth language, I think that's great for America. I think America has to be a country that has facility with more languages given the global economy we live in. And I think we can be very comfortable with that. But the focus has to be on being able to read, write, and speak English if you want to be a citizen.
Mayor Giuliani, I'd like to ask a follow-up. I think many Americans would be surprised by our policy of wet foot, dry foot, that if a Cuban is caught at sea, he or she is sent back. If one foot touches American land, they're allowed to stay here. Why should a Cuban be allowed to stay here, but not a Mexican, not a Guatemalan, not a Venezuelan fleeing Hugo Chavez, someone fleeing North Korea, someone fleeing Iran? Why a special policy for a Cuban?
Well, of course, this was developed in the 1960s because the longest dictatorship, I believe, in the modern world is the one of Fidel Castro. The presumption is that if you're fleeing Fidel Castro, given decades and decades of murder, oppression, including most recently the way he cracked down on the Cambio group, Brothers to the Rescue, all of these things, there's a presumption in the immigration law that if you're fleeing Fidel Castro, you're fleeing political persecution. In every other situation, you have to prove it. If you can prove that you're fleeing political persecution, you'll be accepted. We've had this exception now for, 40 years? And I think it's a fair one given the history of Castro, which is a pretty unusual one. And he is the longest standing dictator, certainly in this hemisphere, I believe, in the world.
We have another question from Paul Tash in the audience.
Governor Huckabee, this question comes from David Haney in Spring Hill, Florida. Chuck Norris, one of your most vocal supporters, recently said that at 72, Senator McCain would be too old to withstand the rigors of the presidency. Do you agree or disagree?
Did you get my response?
I did hear what Chuck said. I was standing with him, and I didn't disagree with him at the time because I was standing next to him. It's as simple as that. This is a guy who can put this foot on that side of my face, and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, I have said publicly, in fact, I think it was the debate we had, gosh, back in New Hampshire,